Good morning. We are working on conflicts, and this is the last topic for 2 weeks actually, because it takes a long time. So resolving conflicts. Well, there's no life without any conflicts. So we are actually living in conflicts. It can be serious, it can be just a little thing, or there are many kinds of conflicts in our lives. And all kinds of entities, businesses, and countries, nations, tribes, families, there are always conflicts. So we learned, about the conflicts for the last 8 weeks, but we want to just think about then how to resolve those conflicts. Well, as I told you, making conflicts is easy. It is way easier than resolving conflicts. It's like, writing something. You just, write something on the paper, not on the whiteboard. On the paper, just draw something with crayon or, watercolor or oil color. What if you mess it? Can you erase it? It's gonna be very hard to erase it, so you usually change the paper. But it can be a good way to resolve the problem, right? Anyways, resolving what you mess and what people mess is very tough and tougher than making conflicts. So resolving conflicts is pretty tough, but there are some ways to resolve conflicts. The first one is mediation. Okay. A mediation means this person and this person is fighting and conflict. There's conflict, but the mediator, the middle person will, make those two people can be reconciled. Mediation, what kinds of activities the mediator do. A mediator takes an active role. It has to be active, right? Active role in a dispute to help parties manage their differences. So the mediator have A is fighting with B, and there's a mediator, okay? And the mediator role in a dispute to help the parties manage their differences. You are different and you are different, because that's why there are conflicts. Mediation by third parties. Third parties is one of the most widespread techniques for preventing conflicts or common resources and promoting cooperation. Recent studies have shown that mediation efforts are indeed a factor for successful crisis management and agreement between conflict parties. Mediation is generally seen as the intervention of a skilled and impartial intermediary working to facilitate mutually acceptable negotiated settlement on the issues that are the substance of the dispute between the parties. Okay. So mediation it needs a lot of skills. the mediator has to listen to A and B. So what they are feeling and what they are feeling, what they are thinking, and why that conflict happened, what's going on still. Okay, what made they can have conflict. So then the mediator understands what's going on and what happened actually, and what's going on right now, and what really happened. You know, the mediator can assume what really happened. Then the mediator has to work with this. Okay, it's not just delivering what B is thinking to A and what A is thinking to B. It's not just delivering. Okay, well, delivering itself can be effective. You know, it works too, but the mediator is somebody who can deliver and interpret, interpret what B is thinking and feeling, and knows what B is planning for the conflict. Okay, and then the mediator can talk with B, so B can understand what C is thinking and feeling and plan. It can be back and forth. The mediator is going to be busy. Okay, but that is not just delivering. Mediators facilitate discussion or assist the parties to move forward mutual understanding and win-win agreements. This form of third party intervention has been employed in almost all cultures in all regions of the world and all phases of recorded history. And with religious leaders, community elders, and at times special intermediaries have all played the role of mediator in their various efforts to deal with potentially destructive disputes in their respective collectives. A third-party mediator maintains an active position in enduring solution to the disputes. Mediation can also be used to resolve international disputes. So, after the mediator understands what happened and what's going on, and listen to A and just share the ideas and try to calm down A. It can be calmed down and it can think rationally rather than emotionally, and gives a chance to steam out and talk everything it feels and things, and then mediator can ask some questions or lead A to answer those questions to understand what happened, what's happening, why. Okay, or well, sometimes it's hard to say this is right, this is wrong, but we can say, the mediator can lead those both people can or entities can understand themselves and each other's and the situation. Okay. Yeah. I was about to say IPEF, but I'd rather not to say that because it's kind of new, but it is kind of a conflict between America and our country and China, and it has 13 or 13 or 14 members in the community, and itself can produce some problems because other countries beside the members can feel and think, and their economies can be affected by that group. Okay. For example, NATO, Russia, Ukraine, those three parties, and other countries, because of the war, other countries, especially it is between Russia and Ukraine, but our just products price like wheat or something, flowers, and those because the prices are going up because mostly we are getting those stuff from Ukraine or Russia. So America is not involved in the war, but from the war between Russia and Ukraine, we are losing our money and our economy is not stable in some part. Okay? Because we are in this world, and all countries are, just are important, and it's not like one body, but all countries are doing their best and sharing those stuff with others, but because of the war, they cannot just produce what they used to produce. So the export from those two countries, Russia and Ukraine, can be, that is reduced actually. That's why the price is going up here. Then the mediator, I don't know whoever it can be, but the mediator have to work with Russia and Ukraine. Okay, and the mediator wants to have more countries, so more countries can work together for reconciliation between of A and B, or other countries can be struggled because of the resources. I was told that the oil, kind of eating oil, cooking oil price is going high, because they used to get the resources for the cooking oil from Ukraine a lot, or Russia. Okay. But recently NATO is supporting Ukraine, and England announced that they're going to support the Ukraine. So then Russia can cut any exporting products down or stop. Then England will be got in trouble because of the resources. They used to get cheaper, but they can't get it. So they have to find, other routes they can get those resources they used to get from Russia. So those things, even from Ukraine, because they can work right now in certain places. So those things are happening, and all other people and nations got involved in it, no matter what. Okay. So, for example, religious leaders, community elders, and at times especially intermediaries have all played the role of mediator in their various efforts to deal with the potentially destructive disputes in their respective collectives. So, when there are conflicts, so the leaders, the presidents, religious leaders are supposed to work for it as soon as possible, so that they can prevent the expansion of the conflict and before it got worse, deeper, and damages. So they can save their churches, organizations, and companies also. Yeah. During the pandemic, you know, as you know, Korea and China has no relationship with Japan because Japan colonized those countries and invaded those countries in the past, and Japan made younger um, girls, as they misuse those girls from Korea and China as sexual slaves for their military people and for entertaining those people. And so, and those nasty things happened during the war or invading and colonizing. As you guess, as you heard, Russian military people raped, Ukraine women. It's sad, but that's what happened during the war, and there's no acceptable, but that's what they do. That's what they do. And during the pandemic, Japan stopped, sending and exporting certain materials but those materials are crucial for making semiconductors, which is Korea's one of the main export item. But Korea decided to make those materials by themselves, so that was so successful. So Japan stopped exporting those materials, but who got damaged? Korea could get those resources, materials from other countries, and in the meantime, they tried to produce it, and those were successful. And who got damaged? Japanese companies, and Japanese government, and Japanese people. So when those kind of conflicts are happening, lots of people try to resolve the conflict, but if that is working well, I don't know. No. Well, the Moon's government, Moon Jae-in's government, now Korea has Yoon Sung-yeol's government. Moon Jae-in's government tried to be a good mediator between North Korea and America. But I think he made great results. But right after, the Singapore the summit, and it went bad, for a while, and then Yoon's government took over the power, and then they are producing more conflicts between South Korea and North Korea, and North Korea and America. That's the problem. And Japan is trying to be involved in the conflict, and because Japan wants to have more expand their military power to the continent. So that's another problem also. But unfortunately and ridiculously, the U.S. government has been favored to America and Japan. I don't know why, but so they're not trying to be in the middle, but just decided decided to be on their side, which means the South Korea has to face more conflict or uncomfortable relationship with China. Um, I don't know if that is right or not, because that is my home country, but I'm a U.S. citizen, so I'm American here. So, but hopefully, South Korea can be solved and just do right things for their benefits. All right, conciliation. Conciliation is the simplest kind of a processing that has ever been devised. It is a method of procedure sanctioned by law designed to enable disputants voluntarily to adjust their own quarrel. The weakness is that as conciliation must either be voluntary agreement or fail. It is always at the mercy of the obstinacy or pugnacity of their party. Recourse to conciliation is voluntary where disputing parties, without any prior agreement to refer a dispute to conciliation, voluntarily invite or accept the assistance or intervention of a third party in resolving their dispute. Parties are not bound to abide by the recommendations of the conciliator. In contractual conciliation, recourse to conciliation must be stated in a contractual agreement between the parties. For international conciliation, Article 14 of the Unilateral Model Law states that if the parties conclude an agreement setting a dispute, that settlement agreement is binding and enforceable. So conciliation is that kind of thing. The next one is pretty hard because before we just read and think about it, I want to just show you a video clip so you can understand it better. Okay. There we go.
My grandmother experienced almost everything from the past century, both world wars, the 5 continents, economic crisis, and groups, the arrivals of cars and the internet. As a very curious woman, she was always eager to understand international arbitration, believing that being an arbitrator was running around a football pitch dressed in black. So this is how I used to tell her about this fascinating subject. Since the dawn of time, from antiquity to the French Revolution, from China to the Arab countries, men and women are involved in trade and commerce. This inevitably brought about conflicts, and in order to resolve them, traders have always turned to arbitration, even before state justice. International arbitration has boomed since 1945, as nations started to trade again, and even more so since the end of the 80s, when the world entered a new era of globalization. Arbitration can be found in every country, but also in every sector of the economy, resolving disputes about the sale of goods in the construction or the hotel industry, in entertainment, in oil and gas, or in the healthcare sector. All major international brands, and even small and mid-sized businesses, use arbitration. But how does international arbitration actually work? To remain practical, let's take the example of a French luxury brand wishing to open a store in Singapore through a local Singaporean company. Obviously, at the the inception of their relationship, the two companies would sign an agreement to secure their business and commercial relationship with provisions governing know-how, payment, delivery. The question is, what to do if things go wrong? Neither the French company nor the Singaporean one will trust the judiciary of the other company's country. This is even more true when one contracts with a public entity. Imagine that as a counterparty, the French company faces the Singapore state. If there is a dispute, the state may become judge in its own case. The Singaporean party will likely have the same perception should the issue be heard before French courts. The crux here is the arbitration clause. It is stipulated at the end of a contract, also at the end of investment protection treaties, in order to ensure a private, neutral, and competent framework capable of efficiently resolving a dispute should one arise without any party feeling foreign to it. This, therefore, requires at least two parties in dispute, often of different nationalities. Hence, the use of international arbitration to operate such disputes. The parties agreed to nominate an independent and impartial individual third party, as opposed to a state judge to resolve their dispute. Parties may even refer their dispute to several arbitrators. In that case, each party will nominate one arbitrator, and the third arbitrator will be chosen by the two-party appointed arbitrators, or, as the case may be, by the arbitration center. Unlike a traditional trial, for example with a jury, almost everything can be agreed between the parties. The number and type of arbitrators, the place of arbitration and where the hearings will be scheduled, the applicable law, the calendar and procedural rules, such as the language, cross-examining a witness, use of video conference of an attorney. This is commonly referred to as the arbitration autonomy. Arbitration is known as an ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, because it offers an alternative to the court system. Parties agree by contract to submit their dispute to an individual, the arbitrator. He is not a mediator helping to settle the case. Her role is to render a decision binding and final on the parties. Indeed, the arbitration award has the same authority as a judgment, thanks to one of the most powerful treaties in the world, the 1958 New York Convention, which has the benefit of allowing awards to be enforced in almost 160 countries. As well as the arbitrators, arbitration centers are also very important actors. If a contract has referred to an arbitration center, it will be in charge to frame and organize the entire proceedings. Centers regulate practices and can even nominate arbitrators. They offer tailored and swift procedures that allow for a definitive resolution to the conflict. The world's main international arbitration center is the International Chamber of Commerce, based in Paris but with offices on many continents, with around 1,000 new cases every year, representing $30 billion in dispute in 2017. The other international center for investment dispute, the ICSID, is located in Washington, D.C. Besides Europe, London, Vienna, Stockholm, other major centers are emerging. In Africa, they can be found in Cairo, Casablanca, Kigali, Mauritius. In Asia, there is of course the HKIAC in Hong Kong and the SIAC in Singapore, with an undeniable growing caseload. The US AAA and the Chinese CTAC also have an impressive constant volume of domestic cases. In other words, the arbitration market is both becoming more regional and growing internationally. To summarize, the main benefits of international arbitration are a secure legal system through the New York Convention, a neutral and tailored judge with expertise in the disputed field, a flexible procedural framework that can adapt to the needs of the parties, and a relatively swift and confidential justice. However, victim of its own success, arbitration can be and is sometimes criticized. It is still deemed too expensive, notably for consumers, and not fast enough. It lacks cultural and gender diversity. Conflicts of interest between arbitrators can and still exist. But whatever is being said, arbitration remains the best guardian for international trade and foreign investments. At a time of fallback and protectionism, it also remains a powerful peacemaker. One thing is certain, from my old conversations with my grandma to my continuing chats with my daughter today, I have always recounted this fascinating journey, a story to be told in the past, the present, and the future.
Okay, I think that is a wonderful presentation by Halal Adam. So I think you understand what the arbitration is, because some people arbitration is kind of new words or new terms, and just before we just talk about this, just watching one video clip, pretty well made, is way better to understand what the arbitration is. So as we just watched the video clip, arbitration is very crucial for sometimes, even though it has weaknesses as it's showed. Let me just read and talk about it. Arbitration is a method of resolving disputes between parties who have agreed to submit their dispute to arbitral proceedings. The parties to the conflict must have had an agreement before or during the dispute to appoint an arbitrator. Okay, so two parties cannot decide, to reach the conflicts, so they have a third party like this. And the agreement to arbitrate must be by both parties as opposed to what obtains in court proceedings, where one party can initiate court proceedings without having to inform the other party. Arbitration helps parties when they need an expert opinion or technical advice on a matter which is born of contention between both parties. Arbitration is also good when parties do not want to have control of the process, but are more concerned about the settlement of the conflict. Okay, so there are some differences between mediation and arbitration. Arbitration, in a big sense, it can be part of, the mediation, but so there are some differences also. Okay, the UNCITRAL law defines arbitration as any arbitration, whether or not administered by a permanent arbitration institution. International arbitration for the settlement of disputes between states is different from the one that is used in civil disputes. International arbitration has for its objective the settlement of differences between states by judges of their own choice and on the basis of respect for law. According to the Article 31 of the UN Charter, arbitration is one of the means by which the organization recommends that parties settle their disputes. Okay. Any undertaking to have resources to arbitration in order to settle a dispute between states constitutes a legal obligation which must be carried out in good faith. State parties are equal before the arbitral proceedings, unlike court processes, where disputants are named as plaintiff, claimant, and a defendant. Okay, so as you know, there are some arbitration centers all over the places in this world, and it's not only between the country and country, but it can be happened between two companies, or one company in this country, the other company in other country, and they can conflict, and they can have an arbitrator or arbitration center to resolve the conflict, and it can be it's happening, but takes lots of money and it's pretty slow, so they have to wait 3, 4, 5 years or something, depends on the situations. But recently I think there were conflicts between two Korean pharmaceutical companies, and they just sued themselves to an arbitration center, and it took lots of years, cause the arbitration center had to understand what's going on, and they had to understand what the things, and they had to experiment those two things, medicines. So it took a lot of time, and both companies had to pay lots of money for that. So conflicts takes money. You have to pay for it, for resolutions, for conflicts also. So arbitration is a great system, but at the same time it has lots of weakness too. And so lots of companies and countries are suing to UN, and I think the UN just sends those conflicts to arbitration centers. All right. That's what we know. And then, what about negotiation? Well, there were lots of movies related with mediation and negotiation, and negotiation is the most frequent and probably the only universally accepted means of dispute settlement, because that is popular. And negotiation means, okay, I owe you 10, you owe me 5, and I'm gonna give you what, 5, right? But it can be 5 or 4 or 7, depends on how both parties calculate. Negotiations are useful where the terms of contract or resolution of disputes are complex. Each party involved in negotiations endeavor to simplify their own risks by using the bargaining power at its disposal to get a fair deal. And disputes usually arise in conflict situations where there are competing interests and competition over scarce resources, and disputants might prefer to engage in conciliation efforts, since the process can effectively cater to minor misconceptions and emotional issues. After this, the parties to conflict can then decide to negotiate on their differences. So negotiating is, it happens especially, when there is a divorce suit, something, and an attorney I know, he doesn't want to take any divorce case because he knows that it is just so nasty. So he doesn't like to take care of it. And there are, some, attorneys, who have specialties on divorce, and they make, any sues, the lawyers and prosecutors and or each party's lawyers, they negotiate each other so they can minimize the expenses or times, wasting of time, and then they just try to get this done as in the right ways. But you know what? A person I know, he's in a case, but he noticed that both parties attorneys are greedy, so they want to keep their cases longer than they can, so that they can make more money. Well, they provide good services and they sure have good, service fees, but some people are more greedy than others, so they want to just keep those cases longer. And sometimes there are flaws, between two parties, lawyers, attorneys. They meet together and they just compromise, for this and that, and then they just talk to their clients and make something weird decisions or whatsoever. But there can be, in general, this is what I believe, they are trying to negotiate well so that they can be resolve the conflicts. The process of arriving at a deal is a process of negotiation between two or more parties, the course of which parties exercise bargaining power. Within a negotiation, there is balance of bargaining power, which each party attempts to tip in its favor. That is to influence the terms of a transaction against the influence of the opposing party. One of the immediate effect of negotiations is the ability to manage conflicts that otherwise need not deteriorate into full-scale war. Once the conflict arises, international actors can deal with it using one or more possible modes, unilaterally, bilaterally, or with the help of a third party. The bilateral mode implies some form of bargaining and compromise negotiation. So that those are popular. Right? Negotiation is the principal means of handling all international disputes and is employed more frequently than all other techniques of conflict management put together. As negotiate is popular between two people, two parties, two businesses, two countries. Always negotiation first, right? And as a model of conflict management, bargaining and negotiation is the primary method by which social actors settle their disputes. In the international arena, where conflicts can easily escalate into highly destructive and destabilizing wars, and where there is an absence of any generally accepted rules of the game, negotiation by diplomacy is as common as conflicts. Has been used for conflict management since relations between states. So negotiation, there are lots of phases and levels, and it depends on the context. But negotiation is the first thing they want to consider, and they usually use negotiation for minimizing the fees and times and energies and more hectics. But if they cannot reach to any resolution for the conflicts, and they just go for other, they just use and adopt other methods for resolving conflicts. So, but the negotiation is the first step and the most popular thing. But so negotiation is not just staying reaching on the middle. It can be ideal, but they can negotiate on this point or on that point. It depends on what both parties think. And the third party can think this is right, this is right, this is right, and if there is a mediator, they can work together for that. But the negotiation between two parties is so popular, and it happens to the people, between people and groups. So crucial. We want to just continue the resolving conflicts next week also. So I think this is the time we want to just stop it, because we don't want to just So anyways, we want to just see you next week, and it's going to be the last session for conflicts.